Hi, welcome to our fourth webinar of the season. My name's Paula Guthrie. I'm the Resolution Manager at Safe Deposit Scotland. And before we start today, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for giving up a piece of your afternoon and joining me for this session. I promise that I won't take up too much of your time. So today we're going to discuss how safe deposits can help you engaging what's fair wear and tear, how the adjudicator views Betterment. We will talk about the benefits of self-resolution, our end of tenancy helpline, and how the negotiation team can help you should you find yourself in negotiation. In our last sessions, we've discussed the importance of inventories, avoiding disputes at the end of a tenancy, and best practice from a tenant's perspective. And don't worry if you've missed these, you'll be able to find a copy of them on our YouTube channel, and we'll be uploading a copy of this video up there at the end of the week, I would imagine. But what we'll do is arrange for a copy of the link to be issued to you all at the end of today's session with a video of this presentation, and there will be times for questions at the end. I'll answer as many as I can within our time frame, but what we'll do is we'll collate them all and I'll respond to them all in a follow-up email to everyone. Okay. So just a little bit of basic housekeeping today. I'm in my kitchen, we're all still working from home at Safe Deposits, and earlier on today I had a few internet issues where it was dropping out for a little while. So if that happens this afternoon, I'm really sorry. We will reschedule and we'll do this again for you. Again, I'm at home. I'm lucky enough to live in the country, but what that means is right in front of me here, there's a field full of sheep. They're keen tenancy deposit enthusiasts. They like to give me their feedback every now and again, so I do apologise if you can hear the sheep in the background. I did try to bribe them to be quiet, but I don't think they're in the mood for it today. As I said, there will be questions at the end of this session. There's a little manual chat box and I'll open that up at the end just so it doesn't distract everybody from the room. And what you can do if you want to ask a question, you can either ask everyone publicly or you can ask me privately if you're worried that it might seem like a silly question or if you think it's specific only to your tenancy. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump right in. So at Safe Deposits, we know that there are certain challenges that landlords, tenants and agents face at the end of a tenancy. It might be that the tenants have left the property without notice, leaving substantial rent arrears on their account, or they have left quite a number of dilapidations, missing items and damages. And we know that it can be quite an anxious and quite a stressful that perhaps the claim they're putting in is too little or too high and that it will negatively impact their case. So today Okay, I think I dropped out a little bit there. I'm really sorry. I got no warning. Again, if it happens again, what we'll do is we'll just stop for today and we'll reschedule it maybe for tomorrow or within the next couple of days. Okay. What I was saying is there's some landlords and agents who perhaps worry that their claim is too much or too little and that it will negatively impact their case. So what we're going to go over today is the difference between fair wear and tear and the general lifespan of some common items. And you can use these guidelines to help make a judgment of what you feel is a fair return of the deposit. So it's important to remember that the property will be lived in and that a level of fair wear and tear is expected because it's practically impossible to live in a home and not leave any trace that you had been there. The House of Lords declare fair wear and tear is the reasonable use of the premises by the tenant and the ordinary operation of natural forces. So if we look at a sofa, for example, the ordinary operation of that would be to sit on it. Through time, the cushions may sag. However, jumping on a sofa and breaking the frame is different, that's damage. Okay. Cleaning, however, is not covered by this definition because a property is either clean or it's not, and cleanliness is not subject to fair wear and tear, and anything beyond the scope of reasonable everyday use is unlikely to be captured as such. So what we're going to look at is a couple of examples of what the difference is between fair wear and tear and damage. So what we're looking at here, curtains faded by the sun, minor scuffs to walls, dents in the wall where perhaps a door handle's bumped it, if the landlord maybe doesn't have these. I think they're called door stops. I like to call them the wee twangers because the kids and the pups and always, I'm sure the door stop is the right name, but the wee twanger thing. So if they're not there and the door bumps the wall, that might cause a wee dent. Maybe a few small tack or nail holes, again, depending on where they are and what they were used for. A rug that's been worn thin just by being in the room, and maybe like a clothes dryer blows colder air because the thermostat's worn out. These sorts of things are what we'll get through fair wear and tear just from a tenant being in the property. However, damage would certainly be things like cigarette burns to carpets or curtains, large marks or holes in the walls, the door hanging off of its hinges, for example, or stains in rugs caused by spilled wine. Not that I've ever done that. Or a dryer that won't turn on at all because it's been overloaded. So there is a very stark difference between what is just everyday sort of being in the property and deliberate damage. If there are any tenants joining us today, what I would say is if something is damaged in the property, can you please let your landlord or your letting agent know about it as soon as possible, so they're able to help put a solution in place rather than let things get a little bit worse. A few years ago now, I've been with Safe Deposits for 8 years. It's actually our 8th birthday today. Woohoo! I've been with Safe Deposits for 8 years and I've seen some really weird and wonderful things come through. And there was a tenant about 5 years ago who ripped a leather sweep, and they decided not to tell the landlord about it because they were worried what would happen. So they tried to glue the leather sweep back together, but they used glitter glue. And all that really did was make a situation which could be easily resolved so much more worse. So again, tenants out there, if you have an issue, please let your landlord know about it as soon as you can. Excuse me. So when it comes to awarding for any dilapidations at the property, there are 3 remedies the adjudicator will apply: out with cleaning, and these include the nature of the occupancy. So for example, if the tenancy is just for a single person or a professional couple, you could argue that they would cause less wear and tear than a house like myself, 2 children, the dog, coming and going, that sort of thing. So it's important if you're coming into adjudication or even coming to the end of the tenancy and you're starting to do your checkout reports, to be mindful of just who's been living in that property and the extent of wear and tear that they may cause. Likewise, you could argue that the longer the tenancy is, the more wear and tear there will be at the end. The contents of the inventory in the checkout report are really important. We had a session on inventories a few weeks ago, and you will be able to find it online. There is some guidance available both on YouTube and on our website. And again, I'm always at the end of the phone or email if you want to talk about this. But if you can, at check-in, put as much information about any furnished items, any decor, kitchens, furniture, all that sort of stuff, your fixtures and fittings. The more information we have about the age and the quality of those items, the better we can help advise you on what their expected lifespan would be, the more successful any adjudication case may be if the adjudicator knows exactly what it is that they're dealing with. All right. So it's really important that we know the quality of the item and the expected lifespan. And I'm going to go into a few slides in a minute that has some lifespans in there for you. Okay, so when they're putting these awards together, the first thing the adjudicator is going to look at is repair or make good. Now, if we use the analogy of a dining table with 6 chairs, and one of the chair cushions gets ripped and you're looking to claim for just to have that seat reupholstered. As long as your inventories support that, then the adjudicator would give you a repair award to have that work carried out. Now, compensation would come into play if one of those 6 chairs was damaged beyond use and you weren't able to get a new one, or the set had been discontinued for whatever reason. The table and 5 remaining chairs still function as intended. They still function as a dining table, albeit with 5 chairs as opposed to 6. So at that time, the adjudicator would give you a compensation payment, and that money can be used by you as you wish, either to contribute towards a new dining set, towards a new chair that may not match, or you may be quite happy just to keep the money to one side and use it at a later date when you see fit. It's a compensation payment for you to use as you wish. Full replacement of an item really only comes into play when an item is so badly damaged that it no longer functions as intended and is uneconomical to repair. Now, I'm sorry if you've been in these sessions before because it can sound a little repetitive, but the best example I can give you is a few years old now, and in the property there was French polished furniture, and the tenant had left candles on that without any kind of protective thing at the bottom, like a coaster or anything. And the candles burned down, and the wax actually burnt the French polish of the furniture, of the side unit. Now, the landlord, when putting their claim in, they gave us a quote from a furniture specialist who, to strip that back and re-varnish it, would have been £1,500, but to buy a brand new unit from the store was £1,200. So in that instance, full replacement value was better because overall it was less than full replacement. So we're going to look at the lifespan of some items. Again, this will be sent out later on this afternoon, so you'll have a copy of that. Where we got these figures from was there was a chap a couple of years ago now. He must have annoyed someone because his task was to contact all the manufacturers of all the white goods, all the flooring specialists, you name it, this chap had to contact them. And he had to find out what their expected lifespan of their items were. So he was going to places directly like Whirlpool and Beko and all these companies. And this is what they came back to us with. So we're sharing them with you now because what we want is for you to have some sort of ballpark for putting your claims in. There's not a hard and fast rule here because this really all depends on the age and the quality of the item and what you tell us in your inventory and what you tell us if there are any disputes at the end of a tenancy. All of these timeframes, as you can see, they're all dependent on the quality, they're all dependent on the maintenance and the location. So for example, if we look at this top one for carpets, you could get 3 to 20 years out of a carpet depending on the quality and the location, because you could argue that the hall at your front door and the stairway gets more traffic than perhaps a spare bedroom that very rarely gets used, so that carpet we would expect would last a lot longer. Okay. Some other things like wallpaper, 3 to 8 years depending on the room, the lifestyle, the quality. Same with paint, 2 to 5 years. Your washing machine, you could get 2 to 10 plus years depending on the quality, the care, maintenance, and of course the occupancy. There was one manufacturer we spoke to, I think it was Miele, and they said you could wash a rugby team's kit 10 times a day and this machine would never die. Whereas someone else, I can't remember who it was, came back and said you would only ever get 2,000 cycles out of their machine. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody runs out there and buys a Miele washing machine. That's just completely impractical. But if you're going to be putting white goods into a property, perhaps consider getting just maybe above the budget range, or spending a little bit more money on your white goods and seeing them as an investment, and you're not going to get into this false economy of replacement parts or replacement machines every 2 to 3 years potentially. Your dishwasher, again, 2 to 12 years. Mattresses, 2 to 7, depending on the quality of it. And then we've got your small items, which are things like kettles, toasters, waste paper baskets. Depending again what we know, type of property, we could argue that those were one tenancy items. I don't know if any of you have met Alison McDougall, who's one of my colleagues in adjudication. She likes to point out at these training sessions that regardless of how much she spends on a toaster, it could be £20 or it could be £80, it all burns toast on one side the same way and they all die after the same sort of length of time. So, she reckons that a toaster would perhaps be a one tenancy item, maybe the same for the kettle. It's up to you to make a judgment on that and to share that with us and the tenant should you come to any adjudications. What we would consider disposable items would be things like shower curtains, utensils, toilet brushes, bath mats and mattress covers. They should probably be replaced between tenancies. We still see these things coming into adjudication, but it can really just take up a lot of time and a lot of effort for not much result at the other side. So if this is what your kind of claim is about, these smaller things and those things only, perhaps consider if going through adjudication really is worth your time, or if you're happy to let that go. So coming on to Betterment, the deposit's there to safeguard the landlord against a breach of obligations within the lease by the tenant and where the breach can be evidenced. It's not an insurance policy, and the landlord cannot enhance or better the property at the tenant's expense. Now, betterment can be tricky because items can't be replaced on a new for old basis, and this can feel quite unfair. I can put my adjudication hat on and I can see the adjudicator's perspective from the legal standpoint, but I'm also a human being and I can see the human side as to why it feels quite painful sometimes for landlords and agents when you're not getting what you were expecting. A typical example of where betterment would come into play that I could give you would be where the tenant has perhaps burned a pot-sized section of a kitchen worktop and the landlord wishes to replace this. Now, the tenant can only be held liable for the damage that they actually caused. So to award for a full worktop would be seen as betterment if they've only damaged something this size. On the other hand, I appreciate that you cannot simply purchase a small section of worktop, cut it out and slot it in. They come in a minimum length, and if the landlord were to replace that, they're definitely going to be out of pocket. So going to adjudication, it's really important to be mindful of what you're claiming for, that you're letting us know that it's a proportion of the full cost that you're looking for and not the cost in its entirety. I'm not sure who's in the audience today, but we did a session a few weeks ago about our self-resolution, mediation and negotiation team and what they can do to help, and I'm going to come on to that. But these high value items like the bathroom suites, kitchen worktops, redecoration carpets, all these things where replacement is probably going to be your best course of action, but you know that it's not going to be that successful if you go to adjudication because of betterment, talk to us because there are ways we can help you, and I'll come on to that in about 5 minutes or so. What you want to do, excuse me a wee second, just move the next slide. So when it comes to the end of the tenancy, be sure to carry out a checkout inspection because this will be vital should the deposit end up in a dispute. The adjudicator needs to see how the condition of the property has changed throughout the tenancy. If there's any deductions to be made, talk to the tenant about it and discuss whether an amicable agreement can be reached. And in the meantime, you should start to prepare for any potential dispute by pulling your evidence together. So things like inventories, photographs, invoices or quotes that you may have for work. And what we'll do is we can use them to help resolve the matter before continuing to formal ADR. Oops, excuse me. So here's ways that we can help you. All right. The adjudication team, we've got a dedicated team of experienced resolution advisors. So there's myself who oversees the entire disputes team. We have my colleague Cameron. I'm not sure if some of you have spoken to him. I would say he has dulcet tones. If you've spoken to Cameron, you will certainly remember him. Cameron manages our end of tenancy line. He's who we call our end of tenancy expert. The line was set up in December of 2019 and its purpose is to provide a helpline to landlords, agents and tenants who have a tenancy coming to an end but were concerned that there may be a dispute over the return of the deposit. So he's there if you want to ask some sort of hypotheticals or get some advice before putting your proposal in. Cameron can talk between you and the tenant and try and reach some sort of middle ground so the case never actually enters ADR. If this is something you think would be useful, you can reach Cameron on our mainline number, which is 0333 213 136 and pressing option 5. Now, the second member of our adjudication team is Ewan, and Ewan, we have a mediation stroke negotiation hybrid where we can help facilitate a conversation with the other party, again, in the hope of reaching an amicable resolution. That's what Ewan does. He heads up that side of the department, and he'll offer you advice and guidance, and he'll discuss your evidence submissions with you, and he'll act as a sort of adjudicator liaison. Once a case enters ADR, I should say, this is when Ewan would reach out to you and ask if there's anything he can do to help. And the third member of our team is Samantha. Samantha does a lot of the background stuff, like the quality control of evidence. If something's missing, like the tenancy agreement, she would reach out and request that. Like Ewan, she's on hand to help resolve matters before they go any further and to offer help and guidance. So when your case enters ADR, you'll likely receive an email from Ewan or Samantha offering to help with any discussions. Similar to what Cameron's doing, they're going to be carrying out some information gathering about the case, checking the correct evidence is there and that the tenant's fully aware of what's being claimed for. What we find in adjudication, when disputes arise, sometimes it's a knee-jerk reaction because the tenant doesn't know what's been claimed for. When you put your proposal in, it might only say £50 for cleaning, but the tenant doesn't really know what that cleaning's for yet. And you've not been able to tell us because we've not reached the evidence gathering stage. So this is where you and Cameron and Samantha would reach out and get this information from you, check that you had your evidence there and relay the message to the tenant. So usually it's something like the oven, say it was £50 for an oven clean. We find that from you, you have your inventory, you have your lease, and we would speak to the tenant and say, £50 for an oven cleaning in the city centre of Glasgow, that's quite fair, the paper's there, did you clean the oven? And they may go, oh, I forgot about that. And that's okay, and we can resolve it from there. Other times human nature comes into play. The tenant has rejected a proposal simply because they don't like that it's coming from you. They may feel that the relationship has broken down and that someone's just trying to take their money. They may just be difficult. Likewise, the landlords may be difficult. It's a two-way street. So we're here to sort of act as the middleman and try and reach some sort of agreement between you. If you're not happy to talk to one another, we can do that on your behalf. And we find that sometimes tenants and landlords are perfectly happy to accept proposals entered by the other party just from hearing it from us. I suppose it's been the voice of authority perhaps. People feel more content that that weight is behind it, and they're more open to being agreeable to it. So I've sort of gone round a long way here, but what I'm getting at is when it comes to Betterment, these high value items like replacement of the kitchen worktops and stuff, talk to us about that. We'll get this information from you and we'll discuss it with the tenant because you're likely going to be more successful with your claim going through negotiation than you would be going through adjudication. Now, I can't guarantee any wins or any losses or what awards may be, but for example, and I cannot stress this enough, for example, if you were £1,000 to replace your worktop and that was the cost of the joiner and all that stuff to put it back in, and you let us know about it and the worktop was only 3 years old, for example, we could talk to the tenant and say, the landlord's experienced this loss, it's going to cost them £1,000, you've been in there for 2 years, it's only 3 years old, why don't you meet 70% of that, 80% of that? Because they're only meeting this cost because of something that you've done. They're not asking for full replacement, but they're asking for you to be reasonable. The tenant may agree to that. If you go to adjudication, the tenant can only be held liable for the pot size that they've actually burned, which most likely would be at the lower end of that spectrum. So certainly high value items where replacement is likely to be your only resolution here, please talk to us and let us have this conversation between yourselves and the tenant. The adjudications team, our ultimate goal is to stop any adjudication in its tracks and resolve it prior to going to formal ADR. There's 5 working days at the start to try and reach an agreement, but we can extend that if you need a little bit more time. And for the agents who are in the room today, the landlords are your client. But if you have a landlord who you think would benefit from a conversation from us, please just let us know and we'll be more than happy to talk to them. I can't stress enough that as long as you're talking about the dispute with us, you're retaining an element of control over how that deposit is returned. The adjudication itself is going to take a minimum of 8 weeks, but it can take up to 12 weeks. So early resolution really is best for both parties. And the biggest bonus of all is that we're able to repay funds within 5 working days of reaching an agreement as opposed to waiting 12 weeks for that money. So there are just some things to bear thinking about. When I ran some figures today, we have a success rate of 38% of cases who talk to us. We're able to discuss their account with them and avoid any formal proceedings. So yeah, this brings me to the end of today. I'm going to open up the room for questions now. But it was just kind of to give you a little idea of lifespans, how the adjudicator is going to approach things, and just to stress, talk to us. That's what we're here for. I've been doing adjudication for 8 years. I love talking about it. Again, check out the YouTube channel, see if anything's there that takes your fancy. We've got guidance documents online. You can reach us on our phones. We're all still working from home. We're on email. But yeah, reach out to us. Any agents in the room who feel their team would benefit from some training from adjudication, from Safe Deposit Scotland, be that on adjudication or general systems training, we can arrange that. All our training is always free of charge. We would come out to your premises, do the training with you and your team, bespoke for you and your team. There won't be a cost for that. Obviously, just now with the current restrictions that are going on, that probably won't be possible for a little while. But we can certainly do things over the likes of Skype or Teams or video call. We can work something out with you. So I guess my message today is don't muddle through. If you've got questions, please ask. I would rather we spent 20 minutes or so on the phone going over all the what ifs and maybes, and you're in a much better, more informed place going forward, and take the guesswork out of it for you. So the chat room's open. If anybody wants to ask me anything, please go ahead. I've got nowhere else to be today. Somebody talk to me. I think my partner's sick of listening to me at this point. It says at 4 months, I think, working together. We're both in property in some regard. There's only so much we can talk about. I've got a wee budgie. I'm surprised he hasn't chimed in yet, but I'll try and talk to him to keep myself busy. Okay. So Alan Parkinson's asked, where a washing machine has failed, the bearings or something else is no longer functional, how do you prove misuse by the tenant? So again, I'm not an expert in the washing machines themselves. What you could do is, if you had a plumber or an electrician or someone go out to look at that property, so say for example, the tenant's called you with a fault or a problem, you've sent someone out to have a look and they've come back and said, there's not actually a problem with the machine, the problem is with the use of it or something that's been put in there that shouldn't have been, I've fixed it, all is well. You want to relay that back to the tenant and say, look, I've suffered this loss, the call out fee plus the cost of repair from the plumber. This is what they've come back and said. See if they're open to refunding you at that point. If not, keep those, if they're giving you in writing, preferably try and get something in writing from your plumbers or your contractors. Keep it in writing, keep a copy of the email that you've sent the tenant bringing this to their attention. So if you were to end up in adjudication, you've started to build your audit trail of showing how the tenant's liable. Remember, in adjudication, it's not like court. We don't have to be convinced beyond all reasonable doubt. It's on balance of probability. So if you've provided a plumber's report to us that says this issue was caused through misuse, thanks Alan, fridge freezer, the message said FF and I went, but yeah, these sorts of things, if you keep records of who you've spoken to, what they've told you, the message you've shared with the tenant, is all about building a case right from the start of the tenancy for the just in cases or the what ifs that you're able to provide it to us. So again, someone's asking for smaller items in a fully furnished property. You mentioned one tenancy, but as these can vary from 1 month to many years, what is a better definition of timescale? It depends on the item. Do you remember I said your check-in report, you should have the age, the condition and the quality of that item. Obviously, if you've just kitted out a property with the likes of the kettles and the toasters and all these things, and the tenancy has only been 2 months old, I wouldn't really expect you to be replacing those items at that time. But if the tenancy was maybe getting into sort of 18 months to 2 years, it might be time to replace those items. It all comes back to the information that we're given. And again, I need to stress, we need to know the age and quality and condition of the items that you're putting into the properties. Hope that clears that up. There's not a hard and fast rule. What we're basically asking in adjudication is that any claims you're putting forward are fair and reasonable. And if you could help us help you by demonstrating how you've reached the figure that you have. So if we use the worktop analogy again, you could say, look, it's costing me £1,000. I understand that I'm not going to get that £1,000 because the tenant's been there for X amount of time, it's X amount of years old. I am looking for a proportion. I've considered fair wear and tear, I'm taking Betterment into account, I'm asking for this amount. It's all about letting the adjudicator know that you're being fair and that you're being reasonable. Okay. So I don't have a lot of questions coming in this afternoon. I can stay here for the next 5-10 minutes, it's really not a problem. What I'll do is if things slow down a little bit, I'll turn the camera and the audio off, but I'll leave the room open in case something springs to mind. You can pop a question in, we can still see them, and what I would do is just reply to everyone in an email later on this afternoon. I hope everyone's sort of, no, I don't want to say getting back to normal, but I hope everyone's seeing positives in the lifts and restrictions that are coming forward, and we can start to see things going back to normal as soon as we possibly can. I know this has gone on for quite a while now, and landlords and agents are really feeling the pinch with it. To help, we're going to be running more webinars. In a fortnight, we're doing how to navigate the evidence portal. And after that, we'll be going back to talk about inventories. And then, what was the other one we did? End of tenancy help. Should you know, we were talking about Cameron's phone line. If you think there's something that we can help you with, to give us a wee call and we'll chat that through. If you don't want to wait until these come up, they are all available on our YouTube channel. You can get them all there in real time. This one will be uploaded there too. I'm not seeing any questions coming through anymore, so I'm going to close the room off, or close the camera and the audio off just now. I'll leave the questions open for a little while, and if you have anything, please just pop them on. But it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and this is one of our quick sessions. And if you need anything, please just give me a wee call, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.